I want to welcome everyone to the 2015 edition of the SU Research Day and Innovation Showcase. This is our third annual edition of this particular event. We appreciate everyone being here. Special thanks to our provost, Dr. Diane Allen, who is on her way here from a meeting at the system office, so she should be here, she said, in probably 15 or 20 minutes. So special thanks to Dr. Allen and the rest of the exec staff and the president, Dr. Janet Dudley-Eschbach, for her support of this event and research and scholarship on this campus. We really appreciate everything that they do for us. For our next presenter from the Purdue School of Business, we have Dr. Eugene Hahn, who's going to talk to us about learning by innovating.
Thank you very much. And it's something that we've been working on in the Purdue School for a little while now. How many of you have a 3D printer at home? Raise your hand. How many of you have a document printer at home? Raise your hand. So we think that the future, most of you who just raised your hand for a document printer will have a 3D printer as well. And the idea was that, well, hey, the future starts today. So why don't we try to work on this and get this going? So that's what we started to work on in our department. And we have some interesting courses as well as some interesting technology to talk about today. So it's pretty common for us in education to say learning by doing is a great way to learn. And the idea behind this class is we're going to actually try to learn by innovating in a business context. So I'm going to start off with a little video. And the young man in this video is not one of my students, but he could have been. And this is what we're kind of shooting for. It was, in a way, it was inspiring to me and also shows you why I thought this kind of class would be relevant for the business school here. So I'm going to show you this, and I will maybe skip around a little bit because of time constraints and what have you, but let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Nate Barr, the creator of Pocket Monkey. I created this multi-tool because I'm a handy guy who likes to tinker with things, and I prefer to carry Pocket Monkey instead of a pocket knife because a pocket knife is bulky. This just fits naturally in one slot of your wallet, and it's got 12 tools, so most cases when you need something, you'll find it right here. Let me take you through what we have. We've got a bottle opener, which is by far probably the most useful thing. We've got a small,
very college student oriented,
a Phillips head screwdriver, 6 different sizes of hex wrenches, a letter opener. There are inches on the front, millimeters on the back, and if you stick a credit card through this slot here, you'll end up making a phone stand. This is really good for if you're on a long flight and you're watching a movie. You don't have to hold your phone the whole time or crane over your phone just lying flat on the table.
I'm going to zoom through a little bit in here to talk about his motivation.
But people have continually suggested new uses.
Here we
For
go.
instance, the arms of the monkey were suggested to be an earbud cord wrap. It's something that seems obvious now, but my friend suggested it and it stuck. The thing I use the most these days is actually the letter opener for tearing open packages. I've always been interested in creating new things, and after college I started focusing on really big picture ideas. But I got frustrated with how long it takes to actually make the next Facebook or the next Google, even if you did have that idea. I was able to create Pocket Monkey using open source tools so I could make it for free while being able to work and support myself at the same time. It's made out of stainless steel that's been heat treated.
So I wanted to kind of pause there, and that actually is kind of what we're doing in our class as well. We're also, like that young man, using open source tools to do things that really wouldn't have been possible several, maybe 5, 10 years ago in a business environment. Another thing about this young man is that he was able to raise money for his business on Kickstarter. Many of you might have heard of it, but if you haven't, he's able to do crowdfunding, get people to give him capital based on the compelling nature of his idea. Then he's got the money to actually go out and develop this product, and boom, people have a product they love, and he's got an income stream and happy customers and a business. So that's the kind of the idea that kind of got this class started. There's a lot of interesting things going out there in the technology world that make certain kinds of business activities a little bit easier. We have a long history of entrepreneurship in the Purdue School and many competitions and going back decades and have you, but we don't have so many people making pocket monkeys or other kinds of products. We don't have too many product-oriented entrepreneurs. And that is something that would be very valuable for us to start supporting. And so that's kind of how this class comes into play a little bit, to start building your own products. And so that leads me to the class that I taught this past spring called Digitally Enabled Product Development. In this class, the students come in, and by the end of the semester, they're going to have made their own digitally enabled product. They don't know a lot about electronics, in fact, very little. They don't know a lot about computer-aided design, in fact, none of them do. They don't know anything about how to do 3D modeling. They've never done a lot of this stuff before. They've certainly not done 3D printing, probably by the show of hands around here. It's something that's new to everyone, including myself. But we all got through, and we had a great time doing it. It was very exciting for everybody, and people had a lot of fun. Some of the things that kind of word clouding the class, obviously, I can't go over everything, but these are the different kinds of things that the students had to do. Things like presenting their work at the Salisbury University Student Research Conference. So they all got to be in a public forum saying, I made this, and this is a product that does something. It solves a business need. This also, many of our students also did the Bernstein competition, and they were able to go fairly far along in the Bernstein competition with their innovations. So how does that get enabled? We'll talk about the 3D printing in just a moment, but this digital part is actually more exciting, in my opinion, than just the 3D printing alone. When you take these two different technologies and put them together, you've really got some very interesting products. So, for example, 3D printed products are a little bit on the static side. They just, they kind of sit here. But digitally enabled products can do so much more. So, for example, we have this sign for our lab that we made that uses the Arduino, and it does a lot more. Okay, this is just an LED panel that you can purchase, or you can see out in the lobby out here. And we've used this technology to program this and make it do things. And it can interact with things, it can be on the internet, it can do all kinds of things. So this Arduino platform is open source, kind of like that young man was talking about. It's a do-it-yourself electronics platform. And lots of people are learning how to make electronics, including myself. I'm a business faculty. What do I know about capacitors? Well, actually now I know a little. And I can teach other students to know a little. And we can make stuff. And you don't necessarily have to have 5 years of graduate school in this area to know a whole lot about it. The nice thing about the Arduino is it runs off of a USB power supply, 5 volts. You're not going to hurt yourself with 5 volts. And it's common to find USB power supplies in a university environment. So this is a nice platform for prototyping, and a lot of people do prototyping with this. This is a little bit of an overview of the board. You can see there's some inputs and outputs to send electricity around. Doesn't sound very glamorous, but our 3D printer uses an Arduino. So you can make a 3D printer with this. You can make a drone with this. You can make an artificial hand with this. In fact, one of my students, he may not quite be here yet, but he's become interested in making an artificial hand. And he's a communications major. How many communications majors are making artificial limbs? Doesn't happen every day, but because of this technology, he's able to pursue this kind of interest. So our students didn't really have a lot of prior experience with all this, but we all were able to get them to present their product prototypes. Let me just show you what one of the groups was working on, and we'll see in this class. It's actually for another professor at Salisbury's class, but you see that the collaborative aspect of this kind of technology is part of the kind of the message behind the scenes here. So let's have a look.
Hi, my name is Zach Towns, and this is my project Light Sleeper for Info 476 with Professor Berg. So a little bit about my project. The Light Sleeper is an alarm clock that uses a photoresistor to turn on and off its display. I came up with this idea because I'm one of those people who needs the room to be pitch black just to fall asleep. And one thing I always noticed when I was going to bed was that the alarm clock produced so much light from the LEDs on the inside, and I was always throwing a towel or shirt over it, so I thought, why not create an alarm clock where the display would just turn it on and off with your lights in your room? So I had to learn a couple skills such as 3D printing, coding, how to use an Arduino Uno board, and simple circuitry such as capacitors and transistors and stuff like that. So what I first had to learn was how to use a 3D printer. And luckily, there was a course at Salisbury this year that allowed me to use a MakeAgear M2, which you see in this video clip. And I'm actually printing the box for the light sleeper right now. This is the start of the base, and you can see I'm using Prowner face to print it.
I'm going to zoom
So
forward a
in
little
order to
bit.
get
He's
to-
making the
started making
box,
things
and he's
such
making the
as just
circuit.
a simple LED that would turn on and off, and then things such as using a servo motor, then we used a speaker. And once I pretty much figured out how to use all those kinds of things, I started building my own circuit for the light sleeper, which you see here in this picture. On the light sleeper, it has an LCD screen that has a bunch of jumper wires connected to the Arduino Uno board, which basically is a mini processor that runs everything.
And I'll just kind of leave that for you to maybe view later at your own leisure, but I think you may have gotten the idea. So he's able to take all these ideas that we talked about in our class, and he's got a new product. That's, hey, I've never thought about that before, automatically dimming alarm clock. I might need one of those. I'm one of those people who's doing the same thing with my t-shirt at night too. I was like, oh, come on, honey, it's too bright in here. So I might be his customer someday. So let's talk a little bit about our 3D printer. This is a robot with a hot glue gun is what I kind of like to summarize it with. The nozzle travels around. You can see actually a little extruded plastic has come out, and it will gradually trace the object over a long period of time, maybe 1, 2, 4, or 8 hours, depending on what you're actually trying to print. Each layer is about 1/4 of a millimeter thick. So as you can imagine, it can take quite a while to lay all this, about this strand of a hair kind of in diameter. We use this particular material called PLA. That might be familiar to organic chemists, but for the rest of us, this is actually just a variation of cornstarch or soybeans. It's vegetably derived. It's also used for medical implants and other things like that. It's obviously a sustainable resource and will biodegrade in the environment. But for my considerations, the nice thing about this is no harmful fumes that you might have from other kinds of plastic. This is about as dangerous as cooking dinner and you're smelling, your food molecules in the air. So it's something that we can do in a university environment without special kind of air conditioners or things like that. There is a lot of knowledge that goes into 3D printing because you have to make your structure go up in a certain way so it balances, it doesn't fall over. There's a right temperature, the right speed for a lot of things. And there is a lot of knowledge that has to go into teaching and learning about how to operate this properly. So we have an innovation lab to help others come up with their own projects and their own innovations, their own creations. And so that's what our innovation lab is all about. We just started that this semester. And we have our first ever innovation consultant. He's one of our young men from the class, and he's working 5 hours a week to help others come up with new products. This could be teaching someone about 3D printing, about the 3D modeling, or any other kind of thing that might be going into this kind of new product or new object development. We're also having 3D printed stuff that we make from time to time, and we're raffling things off. So pay attention to the campus bulletin. We just had a young man make or win an iPhone stand that we were raffling off earlier in the semester. We have 2 3D printers. We found that only one 3D printer is a little bit of a bottleneck when you have a class full of students and things take 2, 4, 8 hours to print. We can print things in about this dimensionality, 8 inches by 10 inches by 8, but that doesn't mean you're limited to that. For example, this frame, as you might guess, is also 3D printed, and it's larger than this bed right here. And I just made the frame and then digitally cut up the frame into parts and then printed the parts and then used an epoxy to make the whole thing together. This is almost a perfect fit so that the LED panel can actually stay in using friction alone. How hard would it be for me to find that kind of panel on Amazon or Michaels that fits, pretty much down to the millimeter? Pretty hard. How hard would it be for me to find a custom panel that costs about 50 or 60 cents that's a perfect fit? That's what I estimate the cost of this, and material's not very expensive. So if you have a 3D printer, you can be making all kinds of things that are perfectly tailored for you at a very low cost. This is obviously going to have very big impacts for business in the coming years. So that's why I think we need to learn about it in the business school. So if you can dream of something in this size, we'd love for you to come by the Innovation Lab and make that dream a reality. That's why we're here. It could be something for a business, or it could be just something that you want for a personal project or for a class. And I've gotten a 3D scanner, and I'm working on putting that together as well, so you would be able to digitally copy an object you might have. Maybe you have a favorite toy or something like that. We'll be able to scan it and make more of them, okay? Or maybe you got a favorite pet kind of like a collar or something like that, and we can make copies of those kinds of things. So, okay, yeah, it's in the Purdue School, but I really don't think that the Purdue School should be the ones having all the fun. And we'd like to invite everybody across the campus, any student from any major, any faculty from any department, to come by and get involved. And here's some of the things that I'd like to point out. Making stuff doesn't really belong necessarily just in the business school. There's all kinds of fun things that people are making all over the university, and we'd love to be a part of that if you're interested in coming by. I have a kind of a little background interest in music and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of interesting things that you can do with 3D printing and music. So you can make kind of some Latin percussion, or I've got this kind of a musical toy from Southeast Asia. This is like a frog. Apparently, this is what the sound of a frog is in Asia. So those are some different kinds of things you can make. You can make little, maybe just kind of art objects. This is like an Easter Island head. You could make something like that. And other things that might be more practical. This is a very interesting object. It's several gears all interlocked with kind of a chevron track. And this is an object that can only be made by 3D printing. These can't fall out. That means they can't go in. And so as a result, there's only one way to make an object that has these properties, which is to gradually build it up layer by layer. And the chevron track means that it cannot come apart. Of course, you could make something like this and maybe weld it all together, but as one integrated piece, this is only possible with 3D printing. We could also have things like we could have people getting involved in mathematical structures or chemical molecules. Or I've seen some really interesting projects where lost art or archaeology has been recovered using 3D printing. Recently, people have been recreating things like maybe a lost temple or lost artifacts using 3D printing. Maybe in the psychology department, you can use the well-known Stroop effect to print something that has one property and then has a text label that is contradicting that. And it might be some new way of investigating an old psychological phenomenon. Or developmental psychology, printing certain things as toys for young people, babies, and seeing which kinds of objects they might prefer. That might have some way of you understanding how their cognitive development worked. I'm not a developmental psychologist, but someone who might know about that would be able to come up with something. Of course, there's a lot of great business tie-ins with this, and we're working on pursuing some of this. I'm doing some work with Professor Bill Burke in the Entrepreneurship Living Learning community, and we're getting students involved in their freshman year with 3D printing and making new products. So it's pretty exciting for us. So just kind of to wrap up, our innovation consultant also can help out with these microprocessors. This might be some other way of kind of innovating. These kinds of things can make very complicated things like artificial limbs, then drones that I've mentioned before. So these are different things that we can do. We're also able to make these things have this Internet of Things capability. So our 3D printer has been set up to tweet out to the internet whenever it's finished printing. And so all the students can follow our printer on Twitter, and then they know when their print is done. They just say, oh, I got a notification from the 3D printer up in Purdue Hall. How did I do that? Again, it's an Arduino connected to a temperature sensor, and when this heats up and cools down again, it means a print job must have gone through. And so the Arduino is able to figure that out, and the Arduino's got its own Twitter account. It's pretty neat. And so it will just make an alert on your phone, and obviously that's a lot better than using, walking up to Purdue Hall and checking it every 15 minutes. So in the future, we'd love to see hopefully more SU cross-disciplinary collaborations. I'd love to be involved with some of your coursework or for you to come learn from what we've learned. there is kind of a learning curve, obviously, where things didn't always work so great in the beginning, but we've got a little bit more of an understanding about how to get things done. There are, as I mentioned before, there's all kinds of interesting things about instruments and art that I've followed. I read an interesting story about how the earliest saxophones had a different kind of mouthpiece than they use today. And no one's ever really heard these kind of saxophones before because they've all been lost. But people were able to use measurements and get the same kind of mouthpieces as the original saxophones and play saxophones as they were originally designed. So that's pretty neat. Or art that's been destroyed, people can now replicate it and bring it back to life. So there's all kinds of things in the future that we might consider. Maybe an entrepreneurship innovation sciences program, maybe a venture capital incubator, who knows? There's all kinds of interesting possibilities, I think, with this kind of technology. So that is kind of what I was hoping to speak to you about today. And I'd love to hear about any questions you might have or any ideas. And I'd love for you to come by and take advantage of our new resource. So thank you very much for having me. Yes?
How does it handle colors?
Oh, that's a great question. That is, you can use a white colored filament and a magic marker, and if you kind of figure out, I want 30% of this to be one color versus another color, that's kind of the low-tech inkjet version. You take a magic marker and color it, and so you can have a multicolored object. That's kind of the low-budget way to do it. There's also ones with multiple heads with different colored filament in there, and that would also print different colors. So depends if you've got a big budget or a small budget. So it depends on that. Yes.
You mentioned that you had a student from communications in your class?
That's right. Yes, he's not even a Purdue student.
Yeah. Did you have anyone else from outside the Purdue school in the class?
No, we had 6 intrepid souls in my class, and 5 of them were from Purdue, and one was he's a communications major. So, and the other 5 intrepid souls have graduated. So yeah, he's still here, and he actually, he was around earlier up in the innovation lab doing some stuff. So, yeah.
I imagine these are pretty expensive right now, but as they become more marketable, they'll certainly come down in price. And you talk about the ability to replicate things. Do you anticipate problems in the future with copyrights and businesses?
Yes, that's a very interesting issue that I don't know as much about because I'm not a law person, but I know one of our law faculty has talked about that. So yes, you can replicate things, for example, spare parts for the printer. If I have a printer problem, I just print a new part. And so that's kind of nice. And you can make things very light and hollow, or you can make things pretty solid. I mean, I'll probably break the podium before I break this part. So yeah, you could potentially see very interesting applications. I've seen people use this with concrete, and they're actually making houses, 3D printed house with other materials. It's the same kind of thing as plastic in that it would get hard. So yeah, it will be a very interesting area for legal issues. People who know more about that than I would probably be best to talk about that.
Gene, for anyone interested, where are your machines located if you're interested to use it?
Yes, it's up in 3rd floor, Purdue Hall 300. And we welcome the community of Salisbury and surrounding to come and get involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming out to the faculty presentation component of today's activities. We sure appreciate the energy from all 4 of our great speakers. They represented each of the schools in outstanding fashion. Thank you all for attending. We look forward to having you at next year's event, and please join us in the atrium for the showcase component of today's activities.